Cheryl and I'm a fiber artist and I'm a quilter, but I've also worked in the comic book industry for nearly 20 years. And one thing that I've noticed about the comic book industry and going to Comic Cons are all the people who are dressed up in costumes called cosplay. And what I wanted to talk to you about today was a little bit about using some of the more unusual fabrics if you're going to be doing cosplay for the very first time. So some of the fabrics I'm going to start to show you to start with is spandex. So when you are selecting a pattern and you have a pattern that calls for stretch fabrics like spandex, you're going to take a piece of that fabric, and there's usually a guide on the top of the pattern that tells you how much stretch your fabric should have. So you're going to just place that over your piece on the actual pattern itself, and you're going to stretch it to make sure that the pattern that calls for that spandex has the right amount of stretch. So another thing that's important to know about working with spandex is that if you use a straight stitch, you're not going to get a very stretchy seam, and you want to use a seam that actually has a stretch with it along with your fabric. So what you're going to do is you're going to start by pinning, and the secret to working with stretch fabrics is to pin very, very well. And what I've done here is I've used lots of pins, but I've also, outside of your seam area, you're going to want to add one more extra pin along the length of your fabric. And the reason for that is that this stuff is a little bit slippery, and you want to make sure that your seam, when you start to sew, is not going to slip away from you. You do get a little bit of a wonky seam like this one here. You can see that my seam is not matched up. So we're going to go to the machine, and I'm going to show you how to use the stretch stitch on your machine. So I've already set this to the stretch stitch, and when you have that ready, so this stitch goes back and forth, and what that back and forth motion does is it gives the stretch that you need when you are actually going through and stretching your seam when it's on your body. You don't need any special thread. You don't need, the only thing you will need is a special needle, which is the jersey ball needle, which is what you use for stretch material. So here we've got our stretch, and when I stretch that seam, it stretches along with the fabric, which is what we want. So now that we've gotten what we use this for is we've got some gloves here, and we also have a stretchy bodysuit on this black costume here. So these are ways that you can use spandex for your superhero costumes and things like that. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about Liquid LeMay. Liquid LeMay is also a stretchy type of lamè. This actually, if you were to pin it, it will actually pierce holes into the fabric. So we, instead of using pins, we're going to be using clips when we do our sewing. And again, out in the seam, out here, we want to make sure we do extra clips just so that that holds everything so that it doesn't slide around on itself. So I'm going to show you how to sew with that. Again, this is using the jersey ball needle since this is a stretch fabric, and we're going to line this up for the 5/8 inch seam, and I'm just going to remove my clips out of the way so that they don't get caught with the presser foot. And so this is going back and forth, creating that little zigzag. And as I sew, I'm just taking my clips away. And because this is a stretch fabric, I'm going to take my clips off here so that you can see. And you can see here that that stretches, and when you open that up, it's got nice stretch, but it's also got stretch in the other direction as well. So that's how to use Liquid LeMay. So Liquid LeMay is great for, again, for superhero costumes, so the bodysuit, the leggings, and we've got lots of different uses for that shininess that you might want in your costume. Next, we have Tissue LeMay. So Tissue LeMay is a little bit different in that it is not a stretch fabric. And we have some Tissue LeMay here. Now, this stuff, it frays really easily, and it also can get puckered when it catches on things, so it's easily damaged. Tissue LeMay is easily damaged. So what you want to do is to use a lightweight fusible on the back side of your Tissue LeMay. And I've got a piece already done here. And then this is just, you would just use this pattern and with your pattern as you would normally use it in your fabrics or in your design. So you're going to iron that onto the back, and that gives it the stability and the structure that you need in order to use that Tissue LeMay. Next, I want to talk a little bit about vinyl or PVC. And this stuff, when you use it, it's actually sort of sticky. So not only does it stick to itself, but it also can stick to your table and your surface. So what I do is, what I do when it sticks to everything is I take pieces that I have left over from my patterns, and I cut pieces, that will match up to my seams, and I lay that underneath if I'm going to use a piece where it's going to be sticking to my table, so that it goes under my needle nice and smooth and it doesn't stick on the table, which is usually where it happens. So I've got a piece already done here. Again, vinyl, because it is one solid piece, and you don't want to use pins because you'll make holes in all of that beautiful surface that you're trying to create. So we're going to go over to the machine. I'm going to change the needle and the foot so that you can see the difference here. So I'm taking out the ball needle. Nice and easy. There we go. So we're all set, and now we're ready to sew on the vinyl. So again, because I don't want the vinyl to stick to the surface as I feed it into the machine, and also I don't want the foot on top to stick to the vinyl, I'm going to just remove some of my clips out of the way, and I've got to set this again just to a straight stitch. So we're going to set that. Regular straight stitch should work. So we're just going to give that a go. And again, I'm just going to remove the clips as I go so that everything's nice and easy. So vinyl is great. It's used in a lot of costumes, definitely for a lot of boot or shoe covers or things like that. And we're going to just move this out here so you can see. And once you're done with the tissue paper on the back, you can just tear that away, and that will help. And that is how you sew for the vinyl. So just one more tip I want to show you. It's with faux fur, and there's faux fur. If you were to use your scissors on faux fur, you're going to get a blunt edge, and that's maybe not what you want. So you're going to use a craft knife in order to cut your faux fur from the back, and you're going to draw your patterns onto the back of your fabric with your chalk markers, or even a permanent marker would work. You're not going to see that on the front. And then you're just going to slice the fabric that's in the back, and that's going to keep the length of the fur for you for when you're actually sewing with it. Another tip to remember about faux fur is that it has sort of a direction, and you want to make sure when you match up your pieces to sew that you don't sew them so that you have the fur going in the wrong directions. You actually want your fur to lay in one direction so that your seam is less visible. And then you can always take your finger or a pin and just pick out any fur that got caught in your seam. So that is just a number of different ways that you can use all these unusual fabrics. And we've also got a bunch of different costumes here that use all these different fabrics. We've got suede cloth, vinyl, lots of faux fur, definitely spandex as well. So I hope you found something that you can use in your next costume, and I hope to see you at the next comic convention.